Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second Alliance Forum of 2020. My name is Craig Hardingham, and I'm a member of the UK BIM Alliance Communities Leadership Team, which is part of the engagement stream. Thank you for joining us virtually, as in the current climate, we decided to continue the forums, but obviously virtually, as we can't see each other face to face. I hope you are all doing well. If you are tweeting about today's event, then please use the hashtag Alliance Forum. So before we start with the presentations, let me just tell you a little bit about GoToWebinar. You are all in listen-only mode. If you have any questions to ask, please ask this through the questions tab, as you can see on the screen. We will have a Q&A panel session at the end of the event after everyone has presented. Please avoid using the raise hand option for any questions. And we are recording this session and we'll make it available to view via the UK BIM Alliance YouTube account as soon as we can. So today's agenda. We're kicking off with a presentation from Dan Rossiter, who is talking about related standards that support the UK BIM framework, followed by the latest news from the engagement team. Then we have our second guest speaker, Katja Vaneva, who is the person behind the mentoring program that Women in BIM have put in place. Sarah, along with Ashley, Varun and Will, are taking us through the latest projects that the Alliance are working on. There has been a fair amount of activity from Building Smart International, as well as our local chapter, and Casey will be sharing that with us. Then Anne Kemp will be sharing her thoughts as chair of the Alliance before we close the event with the Q&A panel session. So a full packed agenda. So let's get on with the show. Dan Rossiter of British Standards Institute, over to you.
Thank you, Craig. Let me just check, is that the right screen that's showing?
Nope, Dan, it's one with your notes on.
It's always the wrong one.
Perfect.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, as Craig said, I'm Dan Rossiter, sector lead for the built environment sector within the British Standards Institution. My role is dual purpose, effectively. Part of it is to help the British Standards Institution understand the built environment and the way that we work within our sector, as well as then obviously work with the sector to promote and connect you guys up with the Institute as well. So it's very much a connecting role between the two of them. And today I'm talking about the UK BIM framework and some of these standards that are available to help support it, that are effectively adjacent to the framework, which is a term I'm trying to coin today, and we'll see how it goes. So hopefully those of you know that now the levels are gone and we are now working to the UK BIM framework, a kind of a tripartite agreement between BSI, CDBB and the UK BIM Alliance, which is a wrapper for the standards, guidance, tools and support material that get used to support delivering BIM within the UK. Currently, as part of this framework, there are several standards that have been identified. We have the two parts of 19650 that have currently been published, parts 3, 5 and 6 as PASs of the 1192 series, BS 1192-4, as well as the 2 8536s. And the way that the UK BIM framework is going to work is that it is a dynamic and evolving thing. And as new standards become available or supersede others, this list will gradually change. And we'll see that this year. Expected within 2020, we will see both 19650 Part 3 and 19650 Part 5. Part 5 is due over the summer, while Part 3 is due closer to the autumn. With COVID and everything else that's happening, some of the dates can be a bit wobbly at times, but those are the current dates we are working towards, where 19650 Part 4 is also under development and that's expected in 2022. So what's happening is that we are building up this suite of standards, the supporting guidance that you can find on the website as well, things like the information protocol and other resources to help support the way that we do BIM. And this idea of the information management principles that support it. So you'll see these things evolve and change as time goes on. And one of the things that we hope to see change is we move towards this idea of business as usual and this movement away from the idea of normal projects and BIM projects, and the idea that simply there are projects and these projects use things like information management and other aspects. One of the images I tend to use quite often to try and labour this point is the image you can see on the screen now. This was published by Design Buildings Wiki. Effectively, they did an activity where they looked at the different categories of their entries on their Wikipedia site and the links between those areas. And then the heat map represents how strong those relationships were. For example, you can see here that design had a lot of links that went out into things like theory, whereas contracts went out to a lot of, to things like procurement, fairly logical things. And you'll notice at the top of the screen, there is an island, and BIM is that island. As part of the way that things have been produced and the way that we've developed, it's been treated very much like a specialist subject. And hopefully through the development of the guidance, the other resources, and this idea of moving things into international standards, we can hope to actually better integrate these things together. And this is one of the important aspects of them being national standards that we create here at BSI. As part of what we do, we create over 59,000 different standards. These are in different sectors. So built environment is one of our larger ones, but we also do a lot in medical devices, food, manufacturing and other areas. And we have a whole suite of standards that we look at. Some of the more popular ones are things like management system standards. Most of you should be familiar with things like ISO 9001. As an example of a management standard. So we have a number of those that are available. We have things like standards around information security, things like ISO 27001. We have things on collaborative working, ISO 44000, and we even have slightly more interesting ones, which include things like the standard for preparing a cup of tea. So there is a wide range of things that are actually available, and each of these support and try and solve a particular problem. The idea behind quality management is that it is there so that you can establish good practices in your business. Information security is obviously relating to the need to the fact that we exchange things with other people and want to make sure that we do that safely. Collaborative working is to enable better value from working with suppliers, and things like tea preparation is to make sure that there are no arguments on site. So there are lots of different standards and many reasons for the fact that they get produced. Now, as part of this suite, the information management standards and standards that relate to BIM are just part of that 59,000. And what I wanted to do is to highlight some of those that might help support the way that people do and follow ISO 19650 and the UK BIM framework. Hopefully this diagram is familiar. It comes from ISO 19650 Part 1, and it provides a kind of a general overview of the information management process. And you can see there are a number of steps there. Initially, it's about establishing your information requirements, then leading on to delivery planning, the actual delivery, and the approval as part of that process. So to try and emphasize this, what I've tried to do is use that as a structure to try and provide some examples of some adjacent standards to support this. Information requirements. When you try to state what you want an ability to be able to structure the information requirements you are writing in a fairly structured and reasonable way so that they can be understood and remove any form of ambiguity. One way that you can do this is using something like the published document ISO TS 12911. It's probably one of the first BIM documents that came out of ISO, published in around 2012. And what it does is it provides a structure that allows you to outline information requirements. Those of you who have been following the work by CDBB, you may have seen a research project called DCOM that was looking at automated regulation check-in, which I believe recently has got some Transforming Construction Network funding to do some further research, which is great. That work is largely underpinned by the same methodology, which is using the RAISE method of outlining things. The idea is that you have 4 elements to a requirement. You have the requirement itself, the application, selection, and exceptions, which form that abbreviation RAISE. So I've made a quick one for you as an example here. If you had a requirement which was to ensure that object naming was done in a fairly consistent way, what you could do is you could start to write out the requirements that are part of it, and then start to outline that you want it to be applied to all objects, picking any of them that are new, altered, or demolished, but excluding any of the context objects. Meaning then if you had some background site information, obviously those bits wouldn't need to be named because of the way this methodology has been applied. So it's just an example of a way that this can be written out and expressed. Building from this, we have upcoming standards. Things like the standards relating to level of information need, EN 17412, and the 3 parts that are being developed around that will also be a way to help inform the way that we structure this. For example, that requirement section of the information requirement, as part of level of information need, it's looking at how you can actually articulate and express that. The first standard to come out is going to be the concepts, followed by the guidance and then the schema, and the idea will be that once they've all been written and released, you'll be able to express graphical, non-graphical and documentation needs on a project in a structured way, which means that not only can they be expressed that way, it means also they can be tested, which also means then that you can then verify that you've met those requirements as part of your information delivery. So they'll become quite important, and those 2 standards can work quite synergetically as part of that process based on the early drafts we're seeing of the level of information of need work. Information delivery planning, how and when you want to deliver it. As part of 19650, we saw this idea that the standards and methods and procedures were articulated as the information standard and the information production methods and procedures, 2 core resources that help explain to the wider project team how processes need to be done, as well as any information or requirements associated to them. A great way of being able to articulate these is using information delivery manuals, which are specified within ISO 29481. The idea is that there are a number of key parts to it. The first is outlining the use case. What is the purpose that this information delivery manual is trying to serve and its associated activities? These activities are then expressed in a swim lane diagram form. The idea then that you can actually start to turn around and express what activities relate to who in parts of that process. As you see, I've done a quick simplified mock-up here showing how the client is responsible for developing the brief and then creating a brief document. That brief document is then sent to the designer, who then develops their design, produces a design, sends it to the client, who then makes a decision. If they're not happy with it, it goes back into design development. If they are happy, the process has been completed. This same language and symbology and the way that you can articulate this can be used for processes within a construction project, and is particularly useful for processes that are repeated. And for example, things like running spatial coordination tests, doing the check, review, approve process, and those sorts of things, so that you can start to automate and systemize these processes to gain additional efficiencies from them. Once you've got this flow process and the associated activities, the other part of the information delivery manual are the exchange requirements. The idea being that you can articulate what information you want to know about something to facilitate an activity. I've just put a very simple version in here that you can see the brief is calling out the fact that the important things will be document IDs, gross internal areas and net internal areas. And then the idea is that the design also needs to present those. So you'd almost have an expected value in the brief and then a proposed value as part of the design, so that then when it's received by the client, they're able to then look and see that that information is included in the design as part of that review process. But it can also be used to do things like identify dependencies for a process. For example, when I was in practice and doing things like door specifications internally within buildings, one of the key bits of information I'd need to know is the occupancy rate of a room. So if you're writing out a long process about how you're actually working out the final specification for doors as part of an information delivery manual, you might want to set things like room occupancy rate as one of those dependencies that needs to be collected as part of that process. So the idea being that once you cover the information everyone needs to do all their actions, you've actually got something that's agreed that can be then followed, tested and used throughout that process, which is a really good way to plan something before you deliver it. Another way we need to do this is to work out some of the subtleties that are happening within projects. We saw earlier as part of the Great National Annex Debate Survey that questions were being raised about things like document types. There are standards that help support and answer some of these questions. For example, a question that I get asked quite a lot is the question, is a door schedule drawing even a drawing or a schedule? And some people will say, well, obviously it's a drawing, it's got drawing in the name. They say, well, actually it's got schedule in the name. So what do you want about that? And it's about trying to make sure that it's clear on a project how we should do that. Because when you're working on a large complex project, there could be a number of different door, window, part, component schedules. And if you're trying to find them, you want to make sure that you're using the right field codes to identify them. So having the consistency and agreeing what you do is an important aspect of setting things out properly first and getting it specified and confirmed in the project's information standard. In this document itself, it gives you various different document types and descriptions about what they are and how they work. For example, it tells you that the document type called list. This document presents information in rows and columns. And then it also has a different type of document, which is tabular drawing, which is a drawing that lists different variations of configurations using single common illustrations. So you can start to get a bit ambiguous to say, well, actually, it can kind of relate to those two. What's even more helpful is within the standard itself, it provides examples and goes into context. For example, text I've lifted straight from the document itself tells you that a great example of a tabular drawing is a component schedule. And as part of the text, it specifically calls out things like door schedules and window schedules. So as part of this, if you were to look at and read something like ISO 29845, it helps to potentially agree on the project whether certain things fall under which type codes when doing things like the file naming convention. So it's very useful to just try and help that consistency to avoid those arguments later on and to save having to rename and to reorganize stuff within the common data environment. Information delivering. Now I'm going to try and not get too over enthusiastic about this one. BS 8888 is arguably the most valuable, useful and important standard that BSI publishes. If someone said to me that BSI was only allowed to publish one standard and I had to choose one, it would be this standard. I'd get rid of 9,000, I'd get rid of 27,000, it would only be this standard. It is a standard about how to produce technical documents. And within it, there's some 200 odd pages that goes into everything. It talks about how to do representations, it talks about drawing sheets, line weights, scales, how to format numbers in dimensions, it talks about font sizes, view projections, scales, dimensions, datums, almost everything is in here. If I was to go back into practice, the very first thing I would do would be to buy this standard. And I can't stress enough how useful this is as a single document. And it includes lots of really great things in there to support the production of things like reports, calculation sheets, drawings, models, and other things. Written mostly for the manufacturing sector, but there's so much crossover with what we're doing that there's a lot of horizontal stuff in there on how to produce good technical documents. One of the things in it, for example, is what are the mandatory fields that should go onto documents to track and manage them. And the idea being that these fields could be captured within a title block or within document headers and footers. It talks about things like needing to identify who the legal owner is, a unique ID number for the document itself. So in our case, that would be the National Annex Naming Convention, things like the date when it was issued, the title, what a lot of people would call the description, and then things like who created it, who approved it, and what type of document it is. So these sort of things can be put together and formed into title blocks that are used on things like drawings, on splash sheets for models, or used in the cover sheets for other documentation. In my past role in BRE, I did a lot of auditing for construction companies, and quite often, for example, I would see things like EIRs and BIM execution plans that wouldn't identify who wrote them, who signed them off, when they released, or what revision they were as part of the document itself. So this sort of standard just helps push the idea of how these things should be done, but very much points to the actual document itself. Building on that, you have standards like BSEN 82045 Part 2, which is about metadata for document management. And you'll be surprised to hear that both the 29845 and 82045 are beautifully well aligned. And that as part of this document management metadata standard, it tells you about how to record this information, but as metadata within a document management system or similar. Those same fields, it gives you what it calls the metadata ID, which is effectively a GUID or GUID for those different fields. And then it gives you an example of an English label that could be applied to those, but which is obviously language dependent if you are working in other countries or doing a project in Wales. As part of this, you can see examples of things like the unique ID number, a separate title, fields that are there already for things like revision and status, a separate field that's already available for purpose, as well as a suitable field for capturing classification, which means that if you were to apply that to that same document, you start to get to the point where you have fields available within a document management system or within a common data environment solution that can be consistent. There's a lot of work and research being done at the moment around distributed common data environments and this idea of how to make sure there's consistency and exchange between systems. Using metadata standards like this one, for example, could help mean that we're using the same fields and the same data types for those fields to enable that easier transfer of information between systems. So once again, being another useful way these things can be set up and done. Finally, as part of this process, we also have things like ISO 9001. So when you want to make sure that something leaves your office and you are a ISO 9001 organization, there are some requirements as part of that process itself. And it's really to make sure that what you're doing can be well defined, that it meets requirements, that it follows the verification and different validations that are needed, and that you record and document any corrective actions that you do on those documents. So the act of actually sitting there and reviewing someone's calculation sheet or technical specification, there are requirements there to actually review and document any of the changes being proposed as part of a quality management system. So following those and making sure that you have that sort of thing in place helps with this. And as it's being written currently, once ISO 19650 Part 4 is released, that will also help support the general approval process, as it will go through a lot of the different criteria that should be considered when doing the review and authorization of information containers within a common data environment. Now, what's important here is that I've talked about some of the standards, and as mentioned, there are tens of thousands of these standards that are out there. And what's important to realize is that you don't have to read them all. There's a very good anecdote that some of my colleagues use about laptops, and that as part of developing a laptop, there are over 1,500 standards that go into that process. But of course, you as a user of that laptop don't have to read and understand all 1,500 of those standards. In fact, you probably don't need to understand any of them. So it's important that you focus on the standards that are pointed to you as an audience, that are about your role, the work that you do, and how they can help support you in your work. And to do that, it's probably best to use the ukbimframework.org website, so that you can see what are the current standards within the UK BIM framework as those change, develop, expand, contract as time progresses, and then identify the standards that you care about and effectively favorite them on standards development. It's a free to use website that we use for all our comment reviews for public consultation. As part of that, you can effectively subscribe to standards, as strange as that sounds, so that when they go out for public consultation or there are changes, you'll get an email notification. As part of that, you can actually then start listing out what are the most important standards that are there for you and your organization, and just keep track of those and slowly build your portfolio up as you expand the work that you're doing and those other activities. Finally, to sum up, my top 5 standards for supporting information management are effectively what we've discussed today. Now, arguably 9001 is probably the most important, despite my own personal views that BS 8888 is superior. Ultimately, everything really does need to fall within an organization's quality management system. And that when you're starting to look at the right way for your organization to work, it is within that system that everything is going to be underpinned and controlled. So ultimately, if you don't follow 9001, that's surely the first step as part of integrating the information management and those processes into your business. Secondly, I would then say looking at BS 8888 is the second most important, because of just the vast amount of information that is in there. It is useful to everyone if you are someone who produces information. So I fully recommend that you'll go out and get it. I'm not on commission, I don't get any commission, but make sure you look at that standard. I'm sure someone told me before it's on CIS and other areas. It is really important one to look at, to understand if you want to produce information consistently. Moving then into maturity wise and starting to look at metadata and how you handle information. You have things like 82045 that help support how you record and manage that internally, and whether that's using a local EDMS system or using a collaborative common data environment solution. Those same metadata fields and those processes can be applied there to make sure that information is being exchanged in a consistent way and managed in a consistent manner. As you start to look at the processes you do within an organization, there's an opportunity to systemize them and make them consistent. And that's where I would point to things like information delivery manuals, which are built off of the idea of using business process model and notation language. And then ultimately, when you start to look at how you start to write documentation for other teams to understand, things like ISO 29845 on document types is the sort of document that helps remove those sorts of arguments you get on projects, so that you can start on a common basis to focus on what's important, which is delivering good quality information for all project stakeholders and ultimately delivering the project, as opposed to arguing whether something should have an SH or a DR file type. So hopefully, if you take one thing from this, aside from the fact that all I do is talk about standards, is that there are more standards out there than the ones within the UK BIM framework, and there are a vast majority of them can help support the delivery of the UK BIM framework on projects and help you, no matter whether you're a client, designer, contractor, installer, operator, or other, to actually do your duties as part of your responsibilities to make those projects a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, for that very informative presentation. Just to remind everyone, if you do have any questions as we go along, please enter them on the questions window and we'll come to them at the Q&A panel session at the end. So now we are on to an engagement update from Pam Bandel and Andy Bootle. Over to you.
Thank you, Craig, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And yeah, second that, thanks to Dan, always really informative and some useful nuggets there for us. So I'm just going to start off with the engagement update and then quite quickly hand over to Pam. If you could just pop to the next slide, Pam, for me. So this is the running order for engagement. So I'm just going to do the update from the affiliates program, and then Pam will take you through communities update, ambassadors, patrons, events, annual report, and the technology group. So affiliates, really excited to say we've at last had some real movement here. The team have been working really hard, and we've now got a number of big hitting professional institutions, trade associations, as you can see on the screen there, as well as constructing excellence. So we're absolutely delighted with that, and this is key for us moving forward to start widening our reach and get the messaging out there and work with those institutions and their members. Just to say real credit to the team there for pushing and driving that hard. We've still got a number outstanding. Reba, we think, are very, very close with a few others. So we're starting to pick off some of the real big institutions, which is positive. Next steps for the team are to now work with their accounts that have now signed up and are with us to make sure that we're supporting them with what we said and we're getting what we want from the Alliance in terms of pushing messaging out, placed on their website, and working with their teams to drive consistent messaging. One other little nugget to share with you before I hand over to Pam. This triggered a bit of a discussion internally, and we've decided we're mobilising to launch an academic affiliates program, much the same as the current one, but subtly different, as you might guess, with academia. So targeting the main universities and colleges, and with a tailored wish list or agreement list, if you like, to obviously the academia and students to support learning and sharing messaging with those various organisations to help upskill and bring in attract new talent to industry as we need to be doing. So I don't think it's going to be quite as onerous in terms we've already got people placed who work in various universities, and just a quick, I suppose, request out to anyone on the call now who is connected with any or universities or colleges. Do get in touch via the normal channels. If that would be really useful for when we start to reach out to them. On that, I think I will hand over to Pam, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. I'm going to take you through some of the other elements, the communities, the ambassadors, patrons, and events and technology group for you. So from a communities point of view, you will have heard that Craig and Hadil, who are hosting this event, part of the communities leadership team, and they're working together with the other members to bring BIM4 groups and the regional groups closer together. To date, I think since the start of this year, the communities have hosted 15 events that we're aware of. They may have hosted other events, but we weren't made aware of those. But it is a busy time, and it looks like we're going to have a lot more events going forward as well. Some of the things that we've done as a team is we recently hosted a virtual conference at the end of May. This is giving the chance to all the community groups to talk about what they've done, what their aspirations are, and future activities. It was an all-day conference. We weren't expecting people to stay on for the whole day, although quite a few did, which is fantastic. We had over 340 people attend throughout the day, and that link there takes you to the web page where you can look at all the presentations that were delivered. And if you go to the Alliance YouTube channel, you will also see a recording of the event, and you can listen back to it as well. we launched the information protocol, or rather UK BIM framework launched the information protocol earlier this month, and we hosted a webinar that took place a couple of days after launch. We had May Winfield, Andrew Croft and Simon Lewis, who are co-authors of the protocol. They were on and delivering this presentation. Again, you can access the recording via this link there on YouTube. I'm going to leave that on there, but I want to continue to what we have just done, and that is the Great British National Annex debate and survey. So the debate took place on the 10th of June. It was an event where we, excuse me, we had a number of different work streams taking place, and we had to restrict the number of people involved. We had a consultant for building, a consultant for civil, we had a contractors and a subcontractors stream, and we had a clients and an FM stream as well. It went really well. There were a number of different points that came out of that. A number of groups didn't get a chance to talk through what they wanted to talk through. So what we created was a survey based on the feedback that we've got. So literally, I want to say an hour, maybe 2 hours earlier, Mike Turpin hosted an event where he talked through the survey and what the plan of the survey, how it was structured, and the questions that were going to take place as part of the survey. So the survey itself will take you no more than 5 minutes. You have 3 options to answer a question. So you can say no, you have no view, and you can say yes to the proposed changes. This is something we do want you to get involved in. Here's the link to the survey as well as the QR code. So it is something that the team, as you can see here, who've put together, worked hard on putting together. So it'd be great to have you guys get involved in this. The plan is to take the responses to this survey and share them back with BSI through the guidance feedback team as well. So get involved. The survey will close on July 10th, which gives us time. I think July 10th is what I'm thinking. Gives us time to collect the responses and hit the deadline date of July 15th. So yes, so this is the National Annex survey that we have put on together through the communities group. So thank you for the team for doing that. Next, I want to talk about ambassadors. So we have a number of ambassadors, and their role is to positively promote the Alliance, its strategic aim and activities. And we have a fair few of them, sorry. So we have quite a few that you can see there that I have introduced and talked about previously. We are currently in the process of updating the web page for the ambassadors, where you will get to hear and learn more about them as people. What I would like to do is introduce 4 new ambassadors today. The first of whom is David Philp, and he will be joining as a representative of the Construction Innovation Hub. We have David Churcher, who is one of the authors of ISO 19650, as well as one of the editors of the guidance work that's going on. We then have Mark Enzer, who has come on board as part of the National Digital Twin Programme, which I think for the Alliance is good with the connection between BIM and Digital Twin. And then we have Patricia Macy, who's come on board as well, and will get more actively involved in the next couple of weeks. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we're in the process of updating the website with some of their comments, some more information about the ambassadors. And here I just wanted to highlight some of the comments or the quotes that the ambassadors have given us. They do provide an important part in what we do. And here, if you can link a quote with an ambassador, fantastic. But I just thought I'd anonymize them all and place them here. We do have some ambassadors on the course, so I'm pretty sure they will know straight away which ones belong to them, which quotes belong to them. Patrons. Let's talk about patrons. They play, as you know, an important part because the Alliance is not funded through the government in any way. And the patrons allow us to deliver stuff, to deliver the guidance, to deliver a website, to help put on events. And I want to ask you to join me in welcoming two of the latest patrons to the Alliance, and that's Build Dots and Think Project. They join a list. I'm just hope yes, it is a self-build. So they join our existing patrons, and the majority of these patrons you can see on this slide are members of the UK BIM Alliance Technology Group, which I will come to in a moment. So we have these patrons who are all gold or bronze patrons, and then we have, sorry, I missed that one, and then we have our platinum patrons as well. So we have Atkins, we have HS2, we have Beamer, we have Man and Machine, we have Bentley, and we have the Department of Bays as well in there. So that is from a patron's point of view. From an events point of view, mentioned earlier, we've had 15 events that have taken place so far. Here you can see some of the upcoming events that the communities are delivering. You'll see there tomorrow, in fact, UK BIM East has an event. Next week, the Wales and South West region have got together and are hosting an event. And then there's a clients focused event towards the end of next month, hosted by the South team. And as we progress into September and October, you'll see more and more events being updated, most likely to continue to be virtual events. One thing to be aware of, UK Construction Week, which was originally scheduled for early October, has now moved to 2021 as an event itself. But as part of UK Construction Week, the Digital Construction Hub is where we as the Alliance are involved. That will still be running virtually. And rather than cramming lots of presentations over 3 days, we've decided to, well, not we, UK Construction Week have decided to extend it for a week. So from the 5th to the 8th of October, there'll be a series of presentations delivered by the Digital Construction Hub. I'm hoping that you've all seen the request for people to get involved, to get involved and speak and share your story as part of the Digital Construction Hub. There is still an opportunity. The deadline is today, so if you still want to get involved and haven't completed the speaker request form, drop me an email and I will get it out to you as soon as we finish this event today. Other events to be aware of, sorry, wrong slide, is that GeoBusiness has moved to next year and that Digital Construction Week has also moved to next year. You'll notice that the dates of both GeoBusiness and DCW are the same dates. They are on the same dates and they are co-located at Excel. So they're the events that have moved to next year. I have today got off a call with the organisers behind Digital Construction Week, and they are looking at potentially putting something on towards the end of this year. So just sign up to their Twitter handles or to our newsletter, and you'll be kept up to date with some of the events that are going on as well. Just remember, we have the events page on the website, so it's worth having a look on the events page for the most up-to-date information. So I touched on the technology group earlier. I just want to say a little bit more about the technology group. And that is, these are our current members of the technology group. And I want to welcome Build Dots and Think Project to this group as well. Technology group have created a CDE focused group. Currently, they're focused on the CDE environment, but this may change and most probably will change to talk more about interoperability going forward. As part of the Digital Construction Hub, there are 2 slots where members of the technology group will present. So that will come up as well. So you'll be able to hear from them at that time. And we have our next meeting being planned for September 10th, where there is a discussion and presentations around product data and digital twin. So that'll be in the next meeting, which is currently scheduled for 10th of September. However, there may be meetings before then focused around the interoperability piece as well. And then, just so that you guys are aware, we are now looking at expanding the group to include asset management companies and CAFM providers. So if you know of any, please let me know, or let me or Paul Wilkinson know, and we can talk to them and get them on board as well. So I've just had a message, sorry, and been asked to let you know that the Building Smart Summit in Oslo has also been cancelled. And I don't know about new dates as far as that goes, but I just wanted to make you aware of that. So my final slide before handing over to Katja is around the annual report. So we have recently published or shared the annual report with our patrons. And this report has a lot of information on what was achieved in 2019. So with a look back of 2019 and a look forward to 2020. We will publish it on the website. I just haven't had a chance yet. And if you sign up to the newsletter, that's where you'll see the first announcement about the annual report. Here you can see the link there for the newsletter. It's a good read. It's not a long read, and it gives you a more detailed, in-depth conversation, knowledge of what the Alliance are doing, so which is quite good. So with that, I'm going to finish now from an engagement point of view and hopefully make the transition to Katja while I try and do 6 things at once. So make presenter. So Katja, I'm handing over to you now.
Hello. I don't need to present, you just need to be able to see my screen. Can you see me now?
I can perfectly.
Great. Hi everyone, welcome from me too, and thank you so much, Pam and team. It's great to hear that things are still going on. It is difficult sometimes when we're seeing that things continue to be cancelled, but we are quite active, and that's brilliant. I am here today to talk to you about the Women in BIM mentoring scheme. Now, what I'm going to talk about today is what we've done from November last year to today and what we've learned along the way. I have about 20 minutes to do that. Hopefully I'll fit in that. So I'll just hopefully I don't need to convince you why an affiliate mentoring program is good for the construction industry. We have always supported diversity. This is the main purpose of our organization. And obviously we've not stopped talking about the skills shortages we're facing. So this program has been conceived to try and help with those things. Personally, for me, it's always seemed like it's the most natural thing that women in BIM should be doing. About 65% of our members have stated they're happy to be out there and represent and speak at events and be part of panels. But quite often when we reach out to specific people, there is a shyness, there is maybe a little bit of lack of confidence, and people just need a little bit more support. And there are a lot of people who are interested in transitioning maybe into BIM, but are not sure exactly where to start from. So this is the kind of a very quick run through why we decided to focus our efforts into a formal mentoring scheme. Now, why am I the person to talk to you about this? Let me just tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm so interested in mentoring. Now, my career in construction has wiggled around into finding its place. I have a degree in architecture. I've dabbled in interior design, architectural technology until I found my space in BIM. But all along the way, something that's been consistent throughout my career has been learning and personal professional development from the get-go. And when I say the get-go, this photo here is over a decade ago, when a young Katya, I think it's just less than 12 hours from first setting foot on the misty Albion and the University of Portsmouth, and just around the corner of this building was their outreach center. And the University of Portsmouth Outreach Center used to work with an organization called Aim Higher, a really great organization which unfortunately no longer exists. And their purpose was to stimulate pupils in secondary school that are not likely to continue into higher education to indeed consider that as an option. And because of seeing this funny motorbike in their display, I kind of decided to see what the outreach center was about, and then I learned about Aim Higher and their mentoring schemes, and I signed up to be a mentor for pupils from around the Portsmouth area. They gave me my first mentoring training, which was great, and with them I supported long-term a group of secondary school girls in Portsmouth, and it was an amazing learning experience, probably one of the most difficult things that I've ever done. And I continued doing that for about 3 years with the University of Portsmouth, doing long-term mentoring and also one-off events for kind of inviting young people into higher education. Further down the line, when I started working in architecture, I did some private design technology tuition as well, which was very much kind of focused on helping people in universities kind of deal with things that they can't by themselves on that line. And then with my first ever practice, Murphy Phillips Architects, I was the work experience champion. So I designed a program for a work experience student, and I made sure that that happened. Later on, I became a volunteer with the Stephen Lawrence Trust, where I was a mentor. More recently with an organization called Built by Us, headed by the absolutely amazing Dana Walker, who used to be heading the Committee for Diversity of the RIBA. And I'm still working with them. I'm working with my last mentee there. And then I stepped into the Women in BIM mentoring role that I'm talking to you about today. And currently I'm also working on my qualifications as a personal performance coach with also executive coaching and neuro-linguistic programming. And I think it is quite important. I just had a conversation today with someone on LinkedIn how important this kind of side of soft skill is to digitalization. So having that experience, I really got excited about creating a program like that with Women in BIM and via the community that we have within the UK and internationally. And in November last year, some of you that are designers may understand what I mean. I kind of fiddled up with some pictures and I came up with a logo, and that was a big stimulation. I had a lot of fun with that. And then I came up with a little bit of a program, which was quite ambitious. At the time I made this, I just finished this book. So I really felt like we can stagger things and we can really make it happen immediately. Realistically, this kind of shifted in about 3 or 4 months. But, you know, there was the ambition initially. But of course, and all of you that participate in similar volunteer organizations like that understand that when you're working a full-time job, these things take a little bit longer than you expect. But in January, we had, with the entire core team, we started agreeing on a list of initial materials we need to create before we launch the program. Of course, we need a handbook, because if we are facilitating something like that, we need to have a view on how it should be done, at least, if it's not strictly prescriptive. Obviously, application forms, the amount of Google Forms I've dealt with in the last few months. So this program has been very heavily influenced actually by the Built by Us mentoring program. Dana Walker is one that I mentioned previously, and do remember that because she appears. They had a mentoring agreement and a partnership agreement attached to the program. We needed to write some website copy, of course, and promotional copy and promotional plan for that. Working along the way, we figured that these two documents could become the general concept of them would go into the handbook, really. And the creation of the handbook was a brilliant process. We we're heavily influenced by the Build by Us mentoring program. It's called Fluid, and their handbook. And actually, we started doing it in January, and it was finalized in May. A very classic 80-20 ratio, where the first week of January, we'd written out the first 5,000 words of the program, and then we continued the handbook. I'm sorry, we continued to tweak and perfect it for a few months on, and again, heavily influenced by Built by Us, but also a lot of other mentoring programs and resources which you can find at the end. And the mentoring handbook at the moment is available on our website. You can go and just download it if you're interested in doing something like that, or just learning more about women in BIM and how to be a better mentor. Even if you just look at the references and then move on to them, would be very beneficial to you. We had a lot of input and a lot of discussions around exactly how we define all that. And I think that was very, very beneficial for our team to discover a lot of things. One of the things that I found quite interesting that we had to have some serious conversations about was, so who are we for exactly? And I think this was a paragraph I really insisted on keeping in a handbook, was that we do recognize the intersectional approach to diversity that is important for it to happen. But we continue to support our friends and allies that work on other aspects of diversity, but this particular one, our mentoring program in our organization, focuses on gender. So we needed to decide, we have mentors and mentees, who's who. Again, quite a passionate discussion around, we decided that for mentors, we're going to accept anyone and everyone, because if anyone wants to help our cause, they should be welcome. But if we are focused on gender, the people we are helping need to be defined by our cause, essentially. And naturally, we're called Women in BIM, so our mentees should be women, right? Right. But if we want to have a clear, educated, contemporary view of gender, that's not fully enough. So my initial reflection to that was, okay, so we can say women, non-binary, and trans people. We had a discussion around this, and we really tried to think about it, and we understood that this wasn't perfect either, because kind of in our attempt to create a definition that includes trans men as well, maybe it's not inclusive enough to trans women. And we started talking all about it. I called in all of my queer friends, which are academics and activists who define with different genders, and tried to get information from the core. And someone that really showed up for this was a friend of mine called Deborah, who just happens to have a Sunday Times best-selling book, just over here. This is Kathy showing your book's presentation. And Deborah speaks a lot about gender, and she discovered that at the moment, the term that covers and is fully inclusive to what we want to put out there would work best as women and people of minority genders. And this kind of experience was very interesting to kind of discover and learn more. Of course, as I said, from January to May, we tweaked, we commented, and as you can imagine, we had revisions and final _final versions of the book, as you do. And with the help of the amazing team of Costello Palmer, we came up with the beautiful form of the book that it is now, that you can, as I said, download on the website. And we had that ready in May. But this is the general steps that we went through at the start in January. And then in February, we were ready to launch the program. We had an event. Remember those good times where you could gather together in closed spaces? It was a great evening where we shared some other knowledge as well, and we talked about the mentoring program. We had excellent turnout, and we opened the applications. I was quite concerned, to be perfectly honest. I really didn't know if we were going to have 2 applications or 200, and we just kind of jumped into it to then move on to starting to see that the applications are building up and people are actually showing up for this. at the very start, actually, excuse me, when we first discussed the program, I think it was Rebecca who said, yeah, it would probably be good to do 5 or 6 couples. Someone has their audio on. I think I can hear the feedback. Maybe someone needs to mute themselves. Thank you. What was I saying? Yeah, so initially, without having any applicants, I can still hear the feedback. You just need to check if you muted your microphone, please. Very small focused group of people. We're going to know enough people. We're going to have enough mentees. That was kind of the general idea. That wasn't the amount of applicants that we got, however. We realized to figure out the selection process, we need to understand how many people we are committing to coupling up in these one-on-one mentoring teams, because there were different approaches will work for the amount of applicants that we had. So initially, if we would have looked at this small, very minimal amount of couples, that would be quite quick to handle in terms of interviews, and we're at a very lower risk for ourselves, because we're also quite conscious that we are creating a professional environment with an inherent power imbalance. So we need to be able to show up for these couples if something goes wrong, which of course we hope never will, because everybody that wants to join and help will be great. But as we've learned, and as we get more educated and aware of the world around us, and especially the power imbalance related to gender, we know that that might not be the case, and we need to have a little bit more control of the situation. This, however, won't look that good, and there'll be many disappointed people. We did, however, think about how we do that, and with all of our methods, we split them into 3 steps. Dry selection, which is essentially looking through the application forms and what we know about people, what their online profiles say, and kind of sifting people through. Then a second step of interviews, and then finally matching. Now, with this method, the dry selection would have been quite specific. We would think we could just select up to 9-ish mentors that we know very well and we know will do a great job, and then just really tailor mentees to them, because we were seeing how the numbers are piling up, and we could do that. And then the interviews would also kind of run much quicker, because there'll be fewer people, to then eventually come to the matching with, again, very few matches. We can keep a tap on them all the time. You know, that's kind of easy. But again, we didn't feel that, and we would then step in and give to our community what we want to give them, because there'll be quite few matches. There's the other end of the spectrum. Why not just match all the mentors we got with mentees? That would give a maximum amount of people mentors that will have a bigger impact. That's quite a significant kind of feat on our side, to be able to interview everyone we want, and it really can get out of hand. As I said, it is something that if we are hosting, essentially, we want to be able to show up for these couples if they need us. And so in a situation like that, obviously the dry selection is much easier, because we just need to kind of figure out if we know that someone definitely won't fit the program. And then for the interviews, more simple process, but much longer time, which we wouldn't necessarily have the resource for. And again, matching just takes longer, but a fairly clear process in that sense. But we decided to try and find a balance and aim for 10 to 15 couples. And you'll hear how our plans kind of reflect in reality later. And this more balanced method will give us a decent number of matches. We were hoping that it's going to take us 20 to 25 hours of interviews. It went on the larger end of that. I think I had a couple emails from the other panelists today. I think we've done about 26, 30 hours of interviews, which was something we could handle. It wasn't easy, but we handled it. Excuse me. And then the con to that situation, it is a larger number that we thought of, but it was the least kind of difficult thing to do. Now, the dry selection with this method we were thinking, oh, maybe aim for 15 to 20 mentors. So remember, we're aiming to make 10 or 15 couples. We can try and narrow down and dry to 20-ish mentors, 25 mentees, about 45 people in total. Actual number after dry selection was 70, double, because there were many people, very fortunately. And we started thinking about what are going to be the factors to let us, sift people out. And there were many diverse applications. Some people had applied with a handful of words, literally, in the application form, while others had written paragraphs. We had people apply who didn't necessarily have much to do with BIM and just only touched upon construction industry. We had people from a lot of locations, and this was a big discussion that we had. Are we going to use location as a defining factor? And as we are on the side of digital communication as well, it seemed like not the right thing to do, because obviously people could meet anywhere. But we really needed something to narrow down the numbers, because we were starting to see how they were growing and we were getting a little bit overwhelmed with that. And really, apart from not being able to meet live, this is pre-corona thinking, there are other aspects of being in a similar location. Obviously, there's legislative sides of BIM which are relevant to locations, and you want the mentor to be able to support the mentee with that kind of knowledge. But also, purely when you're in a different time zone, it's much harder to create a relationship with someone when you're having conversations when you're at the end of the day and they've just woken up. And we wanted to make sure that we really getting them off on a good start without all those challenges. So we took the decision to kind of look at location as a defining factor. In the end, we broke that rule for 2 couples because we really thought they would make a great fit. But overall, that was a rule. We looked at the technical background of people, and within that dry selection, preparing for the interviews, we figured out it was quite important to make sure that the people who interview mentors and mentees are kind of interviewing the same people that will eventually be matched. So we identified an interview panel, which I'll tell you about in a second, and then I sorted out bigger groups of applicants during the dry selection that are kind of generally connected in one way or another to each panelist. I conducted the interviews, and we had discussions on the matching and final approval by the core team and obviously Rebecca. And this was the plan that we came up with. And now the plan for our interview process, as I said, we came up with a selection panel from the Women in the core team. Gergana took all the non-UK and US applicants, so let's call them the international applicants. Jenny Barrett took all of the UK architectural applicants, and I took everyone else. We had split them up like this, and then we knew how to approach the interviews. We agreed on a list of questions that were focusing on the listening skills of the mentor and mentee, the communication styles that we wanted to make sure that fit. Years of experience, we found are quite important, and in most kind of research, it's proven that a difference between 5 and 10 years in the experience is optimal, because if you have less, obviously there isn't that much that we can learn from each other, but if there's more, it's more difficult to bridge that gap between people and have a very productive relationship. And obviously we wanted to make get a clear understanding of the technical background of the mentors and the goals of the mentees to make sure that they really have things in common. And even at that stage, initially I was really keen to interview everyone, but we physically wouldn't have had the time. So we prioritized interviews for mentors, and then we interviewed also mentees that seemed to have quite a lot of experience, because we did have quite a few mentees with extensive experience, and we really wanted to understand what they need. Because obviously, if you've just started working, almost anything could be helpful, but if you're actually aiming for something, we wanted to understand that a little bit better. The 3 of us also focused our understanding of the scheme and some common resources, is that our handbook has quite a nice list in the end. And the first round review has a very interesting and helpful study on 100 mentor-mentee matches that we all kind of made sure we listened to. Having figured that out, we are now ready for the 1st of April when the applications close. Sorry, someone has gone away. We're going to forget about that. So we closed application on the 1st of April. And who applied? Who doesn't love a few pie charts? So we had 51 mentor applicants. There were 39 women of them, 10 men, and 2 people who didn't identify gender. Amongst them, we had 15 directors. Predominant amount of people who were interested to participate had architectural background of some sort. Most people in the UK, the next country was USA, but a total of 13 countries were represented in our mentor applicants. Our mentee applicants were 65, even though we had told we worked quite well to define who we're aiming this for. We still had 1 male applicant and 2 people who didn't identify gender. Very interestingly, something I found quite interesting was within our mentee applicants, we had 5 directors or CEOs and 9 BIM managers or leads. So there's a significant amount of people who are already in senior positions but still feel that they need support. And it just comes to show that wherever you may be in your career, you may need someone to bounce ideas off of and have this kind of another professional advisor in a shape or form. Again, the predominant background was architectural background, not as much as the mentors, but that was still the most significant background. Predominantly applicants from the UK. The next country was we're going from 35 to 6 applicants in Australia, and a total of 18 countries were represented in the applications for mentees. Amongst mentors and mentees, the intersection was 23 countries in total were represented. And I think three of the applications arrived to us entirely in Spanish, which I personally was embarrassed at how shocked I was to see them, as Women in BIM Women in BIM is an international organization, and we never considered, even though the application form was in English, we have 3 applications in Spanish. So having seen who's applied, we moved on to the selection. Now, the selection, I think this is a video that may not be going, obviously starts with a hefty spreadsheet, and we had many of those with a lot of information we started running through. This was my essentially dry selection with all the information of the applicants. Then I fed that spreadsheet into a fun Google map, and you can see here all the locations of people who applied to the program. I think the blue ones are mentors and the green ones are mentees, or the other way around. I've forgotten now, but we could use that to see who's where, which was really great and fun. Then there was some manual work, because I do love me a post-it note while I was splitting in the groups of the different panelists to interview. And then we moved on to the interviews, and all the pink things in my diary here are interviews. It was truly an intense week, but it was a great time for me, especially during lockdown, to spend time with people who want to be part of the program. And I am so grateful to everyone who showed up for those interviews. They really, really made my days with their enthusiasm and their willingness to share. Really, I just feel so privileged to have heard such personal stories, and I'm sure Gerdana and Jenny would join me in that. It was a brilliant experience to kind of connect to more people from all over the world, really. That was April. And in May, we created the connections. We made 20 matches. We were aiming for 15. We made 20. We sent them out. Of course, we would have a template for the letter saying congratulations, and these are the next steps, these are the materials. I left a specific place in the letter to kind of do a couple of individualized sentences to people to just make sure they understand why we think they're a good match. And I genuinely got emotional while writing those for my matches, and I'm sure again Jenny and Gagana will join me in saying that it felt like a great achievement, and it was a really happy moment to create those connections. We couldn't connect everyone though. We couldn't match everyone. And I didn't want to call people rejected as well. And the entire team kept pushing into figuring out what we can do. First, we didn't want to say the R word, and we came up with the term unmatched mentoring applicants, UMAs, which I like to imagine as fierce, sword-wielding, dressed in yellow heroes that we have. And we wanted to do something for them as well. And this is something we're currently working. We've just organized, and towards the end of this week, we're going to be sending out the invitations to our unmatched applicants only for a series of group mentoring events. And really, it was emotional. On the other hand, looking at mentors and mentees that were great as such, but there just wasn't the right match for one reason or another. So we wanted to make sure that we can take that potential and still use it. So, and actually was quite inspired by one of our mentor applicants, Elizabeth Kavanagh, that you may have heard of, because she's around our midst. She actually said that she preferred group mentoring herself, and she is someone with 10 years of coaching experience too. So it was really great to have this conversation with her and try and figure out what this may be. And we came up with 4 different types of group mentoring events. We have one that's more career coaching of an event that Elizabeth's taking care of, which is going to be a series of several events focusing on discovering what you're good at. Then we thought we want to look at BIM as obviously as the more technical in terms of technology applications side of BIM, and then BIM as processes and standards, and create 2 kind of Q&A sessions. And one of our more active mentors that continued to coming back to us throughout the program was Maria de los Angeles Capria from Chile, and she was very keen and actually just spoke Spanish only. So we decided to delve into that and have one of our technical Q&A group mentoring events be entirely in Spanish. I'm very excited about this. And then we're going to have another one in English, which Julia Cravetta is going to lead. All these events are going to have some pre-attendance work that the mentees are supposed to do. So then they come in, and it's fairly small groups for all of them. Going to make sure, as you can see, we have essentially 5 types of events, because the resources have English and Spanish. We want to make sure that everyone that's applied can go to at least one of those events. And there's a small group that can really connect to a mentor, and they can really benefit from a one-on-one conversation. For our resources Q&A, we have Nikki with a beautiful last name I will try to pronounce another time, and Larissa Di Rosso. And again, they're gonna host an event where people pre-submit questions, but they're still able to have a conversation with them and really figure out, build on their understanding and knowledge of processes and standards. And last but not least, we'll do one that's focused on culture, office culture, because as we know, collaboration is a huge side of BIM, and you do need those soft skills to really be able to have an impact in how a company is digitalizing. And here we have Emma Jackson and Simon Gallagher who will be leading that one. So these are our group events. And this is what we've been doing so far. I've mentioned some of the things we've learned. As a bit of a summary, we have come up with a better list of questions for the application forms. As I think we didn't understand the volume of applicants we're going to get, we just had quite generalized questions. So crunching the data around people was not as straightforward, and that would be very helpful. So we have a full list of new questions. We're even considering a minimum word count for some of the questions to ensure that people are committed to the program. We have learned that English is not the only language, which has been great. That initial timeline document, this is actually one of those small technical things that it doesn't seem like it's worth mentioning, but actually could have had a big impact. That document I chose to do on Illustrator because I wanted it to look pretty, but because it was a heavier more complicated to use and inaccessible software, I did not update the timeline. So it was harder to keep track on things. So this small thing, had I done that at the start, it might have accelerated some stuff. So figuring out a better timeline. With the interview management, I did really very ambitiously want to interview everyone involved and felt bad that we couldn't. And obviously managing different time zones, that was a whole dance around various time zones that wasn't easy. So there's something that I really wanted us to think about a little bit more, is how we manage interviews and how we get to know people better in a more efficient way. And with the group mentoring, there will be more lessons learned for sure, but this is now ahead of us. And hopefully that gives you a good idea what we've been up to. If you have any questions, I understand that we're gonna do the Q&A towards the end of the whole session, or you can write them down in the chat box and Pam's gonna keep an eye on them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Katja. That was very informative. I'd like to now introduce Sarah Davidson, who is going to give us an implementation update.
Hi, I just want to make sure that you can all hear me okay.
Say again, Sarah. Sorry.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, and can you see my screen?
We can, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, I'll make a start then. So good afternoon, everybody, and I hope that you're all staying safe and well. Alongside my colleagues in the implementation team, we're just going to give you a quick update about some of the work that's active in the UK BIM Alliance. So just to explain, the implementation arm of the UK BIM Alliance is focused on the facilitation of projects. Those are projects that we can see a need for, or those that are proposed by you and your colleagues in industry and in academia. So facilitation of a project involves establishing the support required from the UK BIM Alliance, and then having a degree of project oversight to make sure that we're prepared for the activities that we have to do, and that we can prepare industry for the impact of the project through communication, forums, etc. So sorry, it's gone a little bit ahead of myself. So who is the UK BIM Alliance implementation team? Well, just looking at the slide there, it is my colleagues William Baker-Jones of Kier, and then Varun Soni of Calford Seddon, Ashley Murray of McLaren Group, and myself from the University of Nottingham. This team was established earlier this year, and we're just going to spend a short time talking through some of the initiatives that we're working on. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Varun.
Thanks, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. So over the course of the last few months, we have worked on creating a new communication strategy which focuses on how we will call for projects, how we will call for participants, and how we will reach existing and new audiences. We've established a communication plan which sees us doing a call for projects throughout the year. Every quarter we will launch a new theme for projects and for project calls, which will be related to industry themes happening at that time. There will also be monthly newsletters which will take you through current progress of projects, as well as give you an overview of how to actually submit new project proposals. There's also going to be social media posts asking for project proposals, identifying some possible themes for the quarter coming up, and maybe the opportunity to be able to vote for them themes as part of the industry. We'll also be presenting at events to update the industry on the current projects and calls for projects being made. Another area that we want to promote is also the call for participants. We'd like that industry professionals offer their actual experience and time to partake in projects where they feel they can offer value. This will make the projects that we actually have better developed, and again, it will allow us, we'll be doing this through a set of communication which follows on from the call for projects. There'll also be an e-form available that you can register your interest on the UK BIM Alliance website. Just a quote to leave you thinking is projects we have completed demonstrate what we know as an industry. However, future projects decide what we learn. And I think it's quite relevant at this moment of time when we think of our industry and how we progress. If we can identify new projects and new topics and we can present findings to the industry, we're going to be in a better position to be able to educate our industry and move forward. Over to you now, Ashley.
Hi everyone. We're going to start with an update on the current projects. So Infra-Air was a project proposal submitted by David Owens and Nick Nesbitt to support infrastructure projects on a national scale. It's looking at the asset requirements of organisations like HS2 and Transport for London. And to take it forward, we need your support. So this is a call for action and volunteers. They need backing and resources from industry. We need organisations and infrastructure projects to share their requirements and documents, as well as put a team together who will work with those requirements, compare them and map the requirements to develop a common terminology. So for anybody listening into the Bazooki call earlier today, this fits in really well with the new IFC 4.3 and the infrastructure projects elements. So anyone who's interested, whether you're in the industry, academia, or in a BIM4 group, please get in touch if you'd like to work on Infra-Air or contact myself. And then the other update is some of the behind the scenes work that William Baker Jones has been doing. He's put together a new project proposal form using Microsoft Forms, and we're going to do reporting with Power BI. So for anyone updating the project proposals or submitting new proposals, it's going to change slightly, but William will be able to update you in more detail when that's launched. Next, we're going to hand over to Sue Butcher.
I better turn my mic on then. Hello everyone. I'm just going to pop up for a moment and tell you about the Plain Language Guide to Product Data, which is one of two projects that I mentioned today that I'm involved with. This is an IET project that is being supported by the UK BIM Alliance. It's building on the work of the Product Data Working Group report, A Fresh Way Forward for Product Data State of the Nation, which we published, the Alliance published in 2018. A lot of the content there is still very much relevant, and in some respects little has happened, so this is about turning that into some practical implementation. But the key target for this document will be CEOs in manufacturers. So it's very manufacturer targeted, but it also will focus on trade associations and organisations, and of course the rest of industry will read it as well. The key messages that we're hoping that this document will get over are what you need to worry about, why you need to worry about product data, what the common mistakes are that lead to poor investment decisions, what your priorities should be, and therefore how to do it with a step-by-step process. So it's quite top level focused on obviously being CEO focused, but will direct to other information, a lot of which is of course being produced by the Alliance, the UK BIM framework and standards and so on. Now, product data is essential to the effective implementation of BIM, but also in order to respond to the requirements of the Hackett Review, for example, the Building Safety Regulatory Framework, which is planned to come into place next year, although that may be put off in the current circumstances. But manufacturers obviously really need to make the right decisions. So we're looking at this to be a provision of independent, impartial information. It'll be free to access, free to use. It won't be promoting any specific platform or service. And of course, it will be written in plain English. In terms of programme, the editorial team are currently working on the process plan and aim to publish before the end of the year. That editorial team includes Rick Hartwig for the IET, Paul Surin of IBM, myself, and Patricia Massey. So we have 2 ambassadors and 2 former exec members in the editorial team. If you want to get involved, you need to contact Patricia Massey, who will be the UK BIM Alliance liaison, and of course she'll also keep the Alliance informed on progress. She is on the UK BIM Alliance Slack, which is the best way to contact her at the moment, and there will be opportunities to get involved in debates. So that's all from me. Thank you. I don't know who I'm handing over to.
You're handing over to Baron. Thank you very much, Sue.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks, Sarah. So the BIM in Housing Associations project was set up in late 2018 with members being recruited and work commencing in 2019. The project targets housing association executives with the aim of putting across the key messages of being able to meet the challenges of the building regulatory framework, and it will be presented to the housing industry. It will also explore and advise on the best practices housing associations should use and the steps they can take to be BIM ready. This is done via a suite of documents which will include an exemplar asset information requirements and exchange information requirements, as well as a report and guide on BIM for new and existing buildings. There will also be guides on how to procure scopes of services for roles such as information managers and design teams. As part of the work, there is also going to be some case studies and key KPIs presented, which will help housing associations and organisations to write business cases. All documentation is aligned to 19650 as well. The project is supported by the National Housing Federation and the UK BIM Alliance, and is funded by 4 of the G15 housing associations, with many other housing associations, contractors and consultants being involved from the industry. The project is on course to be published in autumn 2020, and a roadmap for this should be published next month. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Baron. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about upskilling and certification. So this is a key project that's being progressed this year, and it's through the leadership of Phil Reid of Man and Machine, who's in the audience today if there are any questions later. So this is the development of the UK BIM framework learning outcomes. The learning outcomes support the implementation of ISO 19650 Part 2, and they will be freely available. Now, the point of the UK BIM framework learning outcomes is to provide a consistent approach for training providers and academic institutions. So training providers that want to offer professional certification will be able to do so through the Building Smart Professional Certification Programme, and we anticipate that that's going to be launched in later this year in the autumn. We're leaving company certification to UCAS to ensure that it's underpinned by a robust and consistent schema. And at this point in time, if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, we're focusing on knowledge and understanding, not practical competence. So the key message to take away from this slide is that the UK BIM Alliance supports training providers to provide knowledge-based training on Open BIM, and the UK BIM framework providing is done professionally, and it supports the UK BIM framework learning outcomes, and this includes the Building Smart and their professional certification programme. So to quickly summarise, and just to make sure that we're clear on the sort of relationships between the UK BIM framework and the Building Smart professional certification, the UK BIM framework learning outcomes, they create the requirements for training providers, and the Building Smart professional certification is based on a body of knowledge which is underpinned by the UK BIM framework learning outcomes. So as I said a minute or so ago, Phil Reid is here with us today. And I think if you have any questions, please hold on to those until the end of the session, and Phil will be able to answer them for you. The other thing that I'm going to talk about is update to resources to support the implementation of ISO 19650. So we had the release of guidance, the 4th edition of ISO 19650 Part 2, which is guidance to support processes for project delivery. And that was issued at the end of March. And then in May, the information protocol to support projects implementing ISO 19650 Part 2 was also published. And I think we'd like to say a big thank you to the authors, Andrew Croft of Beale & Company, May Winfield of Bureau Happold, and Simon Lewis of Womble Bond Dickinson for all the hard work in getting this resource over the line. I know that it's had a lot of downloads, it's generated a lot of interest. So if you weren't aware, I would suggest that you visit the UK BIM framework website and download the protocol. At the last forum, we mentioned that Nigel Davis of Evolve Consultancy had facilitated a guidance feedback initiative, and he received a really great response to that. And the editors of ISO 19650 Part 2 and the authors were working our way through the generated feedback. But one of the recurring pieces of feedback was about the size of the Part 2 guidance. And if you've downloaded the 4th edition or visited the 4th edition, you'll know that it's a fairly hefty body of content. So we really need to make sure that the guidance is accessible and people can get to the elements that are important to them as quickly as possible. So we've decided to split the guidance down. So what you're looking at now is what this split might look like. And what I would say is that this has not been finalized, so it could change. But the proposal is that we have guidance that cuts across all of the standards within the ISO 19650 series in the form of Part 1, concept guidance, and then guidance parts A, B, C, and D, and E and F and G if we need them. We'll then have guidance specifically about each standard within the ISO 19650 series. So our next update to the Part 2 guidance is going to be published in September. For the last 18 months, we committed to a quarterly update, but this is a really significant piece of work and we need to make sure that we get it right. So we're just giving ourselves an extra month to make sure that we can split the guidance down. We've got the right referencing between the different areas of guidance and so on. When we do release in September, we'll be seeing new content, including examples to support information requirements, and we will have content around the responsibility matrices. Now, what we've realized in splitting this guidance out is that we've still got work to do around the procurement element, the tendering and appointments bit. So guidance C will be light when we release it in September. It'll contain content around the BIM execution plan. And then our activities after that will be to look at a development of that guidance part C. So that's going to be, I would say, hitting the bookshelves, hitting the UK BIM framework website in September. So please do look out for that. Just in terms of other work that's on the horizon. So Dan Rossiter mentioned earlier in his presentation about the development of ISO 19650 Part 3 and ISO 19650 Part 5. So Part 3 is about the operational phase of assets and Part 5 is a security-minded approach. We will be developing guidance to support ISO 19650 Part 3. And Alex Luck, who's one of the authors of 19650 Part 5, who works for CPNI, she will be developing guidance about that particular standard. We're also currently working with CDBB to explore how the Part 2 guidance can be digitalized. So that project's happening in the background now, and more will be exposed about that project over the next quarter or so. And then Andy Bootle, UK BIM Alliance exec member and of KIA, is looking to develop an industry-wide survey to understand how information management using BIM is being incorporated into projects. So we've also got a number of other projects taking shape, including the work that we're doing as part of the BIM Interoperability Expert Group with the Construction Innovation Hub and CDBB. And we want to make sure that we extend our reach into industry and exploring how to do this through our engagement stream. So one of the key activities for us over the next month or so is to really get the proper picture of those projects so we can understand their timeline and get them moving and into shape. So that's the implementation update. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd like to thank Varun, Ashley and Sue as well for speaking so eloquently. And if you have any questions, we will be around until the end of the presentations. And if you want to get in touch with us, then you can email us at implementation@ukbimalliance.org. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Sarah and team. That was an excellent presentation. I'd like to now welcome Cassie Rutland, who's going to give us an update on Building Smart UK and Ireland. Up to you, Casey.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone so far, the speakers and the attendees. It's been a really good event so far. I'm here to give you a quick update as to what's been going on Building Smart UK and Ireland in the last few months. We'll dive straight in. I do have to apologise for anyone who was at the Assemble event this morning. Looking at the attendees online right now, there's probably about between 8 and 10 of you that were in the session this morning, so I apologise for some of the repetitiveness of this presentation. A bit of context about Building Smart UK and Ireland for those of you who don't know. Building Smart UK and Ireland sits alongside the UK BIM Alliance as one and the same entity. And our legal entity is Syria, and they look after and deal with our accounting with Stephen. And basically, we are one and the same organisation and have the same membership, and that was brought together for that particular reason, to make sure that the stories are aligned, the audiences are aligned, and to expose more of what the traditional BIM crowd were to more of what Open BIM is about, and vice versa. But also to reach a much greater audience. And you can see things and the mechanisms we're starting to use for doing that in programs like the Ambassador Programme and the Affiliates Programme, is trying to reach a much broader audience. Obviously, Building Smart UK and Ireland is the UK and Ireland chapter of Building Smart International. And really what the role of Building Smart UK and Ireland is to gather the needs, requirements and opinions of the UK and Ireland industry for the work that Building Smart International are doing in defining the standards, as we've seen in previous presentations. I'm not going to read this all out, but primarily, I think the point I'm going to raise today is the last sentence. Building Smart is an open, neutral and international not-for-profit organisation. In the UK and Ireland, any individual can be a member of Building Smart UK and Ireland for free. And we support that by our connection and relationship with the UK BIM Alliance as being the same pool of people. And we support that through various different things, through membership at Building Smart International level for companies, but also through our patronage and sharing of back of house, if you like, people that are doing things. So I hope that makes things a little bit clearer. There was a little bit of question this morning about whether individual memberships were paid or not, but they are very much free. We do encourage companies to join and support us financially in what we do. And we have different routes by the way of how companies can approach different parts of the organisation. So we have scenario one, where a company approaches the UK BIM Alliance and becomes a patron or supporter. And then the question was, okay, so what does that make them in terms of Building Smart UK and Ireland? And we're gradually getting to the point where we understand this a bit better. And we've stated now that becoming a patron, one of your benefits of being a patron is that you become a company member of Building Smart UK and Ireland. And that has various benefits also. The second scenario is where a company approaches Building Smart UK and Ireland, says, I want to be a UK and Ireland company member. We don't actually have that as a route now. So what we're saying is, if you become a patron or supporter of Building Smart UK and Ireland, sorry, of UK BIM Alliance, then you will become a company member of Building Smart UK and Ireland. The third one, third scenario is where either an international company approaches Building Smart International. They become a multinational member and select UK and Ireland as a chapter, or they go through Building Smart International and be a single chapter member, obviously of Building Smart UK and Ireland. Then the question was, what do they become in relationship to the UK BIM Alliance? And what we've determined is that if you do go through that route, you do become a patron of the UK BIM Alliance at the lowest level. So we are maintaining these relationships. We are looking to involve and engage all the organisations, whether they're multinational companies or UK only ones, and trying to bring them into being involved with the UK BIM Alliance and Building Smart UK and Ireland at the same time. We do have our 4 Vs. We'd like the Building Smart UK and Ireland chapter to be vast, vibrant, vital and valuable. And the explanation of these is that we want to create awareness, engagement, communication and commitment from a greater number of people. We want to encourage people to be active, to be applicable, to support them and encourage that enthusiasm. We need to be vital as a chapter. We need to be productive, and you can see we're building on all the work that the UK BIM Alliance have done in doing our part for the international side of Building Smart, of being productive, meeting our UK and Ireland industry and needs, and being that voice at an international level, but also being concise. There is a huge amount of work, absolutely huge amount of work being done by Building Smart International. So what we need to be is concise about how we communicate our needs and requirements for the UK and Ireland. We need to be valuable. So we need targeted involvement with timely advice back to our industry. And a big part of it for me is to make sure our communications back out into the industry is really about making it common sense and usable, practical for day-to-day use right now. So make sure it's not just for experts. It doesn't seem like you need to spend months and months and months investigating and understanding and educating yourself. There is absolutely some education that needs to be done, but you don't need to be that person that's involved in everything. You just need to make sure you know how you can get open BIM processes to work for you. 3 months ago, at the update I did at the last forum, we asked for a few extra people to join the committee. There were only a few of us back then, and I'm glad to say that after that call for help, we do now have a significantly larger team. So our committee now is up to this number of people that are on the screen, including the steering group is 15 people. And as of this morning, Trish Massey gets, I think, which is a 3rd or 4th mention for this session today. Trish has now joined us as part of the committee and will build on her work in the product data room with the IET and with Sue, and build on her work and be that coordinator or co-coordinator for the product data room that she's working with already. So it's really just about formalising that role and being a coordinator as part of that role. So we have different streams that our committee members are responsible for. Nick and myself as chair and vice chair are engaged in the Building Smart International liaison, making sure we're talking and representing ourselves properly at that level. Then we have Emma and Dave dealing with the engagement side of things, with Dave also taking on the membership and rooms and project side. We have Phil, who's been mentioned already by Sarah, and the work they're doing on the upskilling and the professional certification supported by Lawrence. And we have Stephen and myself doing the reporting on the financing with respect to membership fees and how much we're spending on various pieces of work and sending people to various conferences as and when they do get back online, or back offline, should I say. We do have other people in the committee who we're currently placing and finding a best fit for their efforts. But in addition to the back of house work streams, if you like, the committee work streams, we have now placed people in coordinator roles. So we're picking 2 coordinators for each of the rooms that are active at international level. So we've got airport, building, construction, infrastructure, product, railway, regulatory and technical rooms. and we currently have one coordinator in most of those, aside from the airport room. So if anyone knows anyone who is keen to join Building Smart UK and Ireland and be a coordinator or a contributor for the airport room, please do let us know. We know there's a lot of discussion about various airports in the UK, particularly now, with business being pushed and pressured in all sorts of different directions. But we do need people to fill these gaps. We do have what we've called the bench, in terms of taking our committee members and saying, actually, Stephen and myself and Phil have a lot of work going on with other things, so we're not going to be putting ourselves forward to be coordinators for any of the rooms. We do still obviously have the gaps. The one I've highlighted there is Lawrence being a second coordinator for the product room. That was a temporary thing, and that's where we're going to slot Trish in as being the second coordinator there. So again, it's a call for help. We do still need more people. It does seem a lot more resilient. The committee we have now is much wider, much greater. There's a huge amount of enthusiasm, but there's also an awful lot of work that's going on that needs representation at international level from the UK and Ireland. So just flicking through these again, I'm not going to go into much more detail. What we said this morning is that the next Assemble session in 3 months will include updates from all of those rooms, now that we have coordinators to go and source the information, what's going on, and communicate that back out to our industry between now and then, and start to gather opinions and needs, requirements for all of those various different sessions. So in news, as we mentioned, we had the Assemble 2 event this morning. I did an update on what's going on at international level and within Zuki that you've just pretty much seen. Phil did an update from the education stream on the digital competence skilling programme. Then we had Tim Davies do a case study of IFC in real life about Hinkley Point C and the work that's going on there. And then Emma ran a great IFC quiz, which was really great and genuinely interesting. A lot of engagement from the attendees and a few people watching and learning as they were going through basically answers to the questions. Other news, we now have a LinkedIn company page, so please do go along there, follow along. That will be one of our primary channels for communicating anything that's going on in all the different rooms, and I'm hoping to get that as being as active as possible. In terms of interoperability in the UK and Ireland, we have had the publication of 2 documents. In March, the Interoperability Expert Group report, which had some recommendations in there that then went out for industry comment, quickly followed up in June by the public consultation summary. A really good document, good set of documents that point out the current challenges that we're having. And I think useful for this audience is just this snapshot of the summary, the exec summary. Some key elements of interoperability that are required, I think that most of us will recognise as being challenges that we have had since the BIM thing kicked off in a big way, but also are still challenges. So the list of 7 items there in front of you are all relevant to what we're doing right now. Particularly relevant to Building Smart UK and Ireland are the COBE and IFC stream, education and skills standards, and then the asset information model. CDE, so the open CDE work stream at Building Smart international level, all obviously underpinned by a standard data approach. So it feels like there's a lot of coming together from a lot of different parts of the industry to come to recognise that this is a key focus of what needs to be done to drive our development of transformation, digital transformation of our industry much further forward in a fast way. The bottom sentence, it was recognised in the report that government must lead the way, and that there's a consensus in the UK government, or that the UK government should continue its support for the development and adoption of the above enablers as part of the evolving BIM mandate. And I think Anne next will cover a few more bits and pieces about the next steps in this. But just to say that Building Smart UK and I think this is a positive thing, and I'm looking forward to driving whatever comes next. Last time, I think, in this forum, I presented or teased you with what was coming in terms of the technical roadmap for Building Smart International. That's now gone live. It's available online. If you go to the Building Smart International website, there's a whole page dedicated to the technical roadmap. You can download the actual document, but actually what's really good is the 30-minute video that's on screen right now. So go there, watch the Vimeo, and understand what the challenges were or are with the current setup of the open standards that Building Smart control, and how they're going to be changing and adapting to take on board future changes in what's coming in the industry. Again, something that's been mentioned already is the Building Smart Awards for 2020. They have extended the deadline. The original deadline was the 5th of July. It's now the 31st of July. And again, something that we've pushed out on social media channels and mentioned this morning is that our Vice Chair, Nick Nisbet, and Tim Davis, who did the presentation from Hinkley Point C this morning, he was the winner of his award last year. They're offering help and coaching for anyone from the UK and Ireland who's looking to submit something to win the award at various different categories. So if you do want some help, or you want some coaching or anything, or just want to run something past Nick and Tim, then please do let us know, and we'll set it up as quickly as we can to make sure you hit your deadline for any submissions. I've added a couple of things in here for Building Smart Good Reads. Now, there's just 3 of these. They're not all necessarily new, but back in May, Building Smart published a positioning paper about enabling an ecosystem of digital twins, very much aligned with the UK National Digital Twin Programme, but it's about how Building Smart see their role in helping this transition towards working with digital twins. Very much worth a read. Another one is another hot topic, which is often discussed. Again, this was published in March, so it's not necessarily new. But this is about the white paper that shows about how BIM and GIS integrate with one another. It really is worth a read, written and published in tandem with the Open Geospatial Consortium. So very much what a lot of us have understood already about, it's really just about BIM and GIS, it's about the eye, it's about the information, but it's about how we coordinate and transmit that information between the two. And then finally, for the good reads, it's an announcement from 2018 really, but it's just to reinforce for those of you who don't know how well connected and working in tandem with other existing organisations Building Smart already is. So this was a memorandum of understanding that was signed back in 2018 with GS1. GS1 are best known for creating being the governance of barcodes. So I think we can all imagine how the world would or wouldn't be without barcodes right now. But Building Smart and GS1 have a close relationship and are working actively together to enable one another's work in respective industries. So really worth a read. That's a very, very quick read. That's just a press release, but it's worth reading to understand the type of work that Building Smart International does. So again, reinforcing, leaving you with a message that this chapter is already vast, vibrant and vital and valuable, but we want it to be more of all of those things. So we do encourage you to get your help. We've also already got a question for people asking how they can join the committee. Really encouraged by that. We'll be in touch afterwards. So Asa, I'll be in touch with you afterwards to see how you might help. Questions are coming at the panel afterwards. That was a very quick rattle through. As usual, you can get in touch with us on any of the usual channels and the LinkedIn page I mentioned earlier. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Casey. That was very informative. We now have Dr. Anne Kim, who is the chair of the UK BIM Alliance and who is going to speak to us and give us a view from the chair. Over to you, Anne.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you to everyone who's gone before, and I very much hope that you found the briefing today useful and informative, that you'll stay engaged and you'll stay inspired as well, which is really important to us all. There's a number of things that I wanted to cover today. The first one, I think, is to celebrate because there's a few important milestones that we've been able to go through over the last couple of months, and there's been a lot of work to actually get to that point. The first one is the publication of ISO 19650 Part 5 with author Alex Luck, and as has already been covered, there'll be the launch event with British Standards Institution webinar next week, July the 9th. So please do attend that. There'll be quite full briefings on the UK BIM framework, as well as on Part 5, and the differences between the existing PAS 1192 Part 5 and now the ISO 19650. Also, and I have to say a huge relief, not because I wasn't confident that it was a good piece of work, but simply because it's such a significant missing piece, is that last week ISO 19650 Part 3 actually got a conclusive positive final vote for publication. So we now know that Part 3 is coming out. We expect it to come out by the autumn. And as has already been pointed out, we are gearing up to write the initial guidance for that as it comes out too. It's been a huge amount of work. It's built on the really strong relationships which have been formed whilst we've been developing the ISO 19650 series. I think everyone involved would say it's been really insightful. It's been hugely collaborative, from which I mean there've been some big arguments, some quite significant bust ups, but we've all been able to come back together and discuss, debate, and hopefully come to a really good consensus. I think it pointed out for the UK how we needed to improve on the communication of managing information for whole life for the built environment, and also how things are shifting forward as we increasingly realise digital transformation. So well done to David Churcher, who's the author for Part 3, but also the whole team who've been leaning in and making that become a success. Secondly, the UK BIM framework. This is coming together of the British Standards Institution, the Centre of Digital Built Britain, and the UK BIM Alliance, with the Department of BAEs as our platinum patron for the UK BIM Alliance, being a really great supporter of the UK BIM framework. As Casey has just mentioned, part of the conclusions or recommendations of the interoperability report has been that government really leans into the mandate, provides clarification on what that means around the UK BIM framework, and then these pieces that are going to be investigated from the interoperability report. But I think one of the things around that framework is that it's really important that we clearly communicate what the UK BIM framework is and what it's leading to. So I think you'll all be aware of the work of the Centre of Digital Built Britain around the National Digital Twin and the Information Management Framework. What's absolutely important is that we all realise that the UK BIM framework is a fundamental foundation to what is being developed and will be coming forward over the next 5 to 10 years. But we are looking at a fairly long term for the National Digital Twin, and we really need to stay in the moment, in the here and now, and ensure that we're helping us, the whole of the built environment industry, in being able to implement these standards, which frankly it would be an utter waste of time doing all of this if it wasn't helpful to the industry and it wasn't possible to actually implement in a pragmatic way. So there's two activities which I think are really important at the moment, and I would urge you to be involved, and being on the call, I suspect you already are, but to encourage others around you to get involved as well. So the first of these is the National Annex. As has already been said, we've been having the Great British debate around the National Annex, and we've allowed for 3 months of this public consultation, which is actually quite unusual. Often it can be done in a month or so's time, but I was really quite emphatic that I wanted us to have that space to allow everyone to realise that there was actually a consultation happening, because sometimes it does pass us by because these things can happen so quickly. But also to then be able to stand back and reflect and think, okay, what needs to happen with that National Annex to help people to understand, but also to implement in a consistent way. And there are many things around the National Annex which has caused consternation, debate, concern, misunderstanding. So this isn't a small piece of work, and we absolutely want to get to the best point we can from the point of view of consensus and a sensible, pragmatic approach. We've actually allowed 2 days to go through comments. We're getting quite a few comments coming in, and we do want to be able to discuss those and get to a sensible resolution. So I can't emphasize enough, we want to hear from you. We're taking into account the comments which had been received, if you were aware and recall that there was an alignment of the old PAS 1192 Part 2 and Part 3 happening, and there was a lot of comments received around those. We have carried those forward and invited people to review and update those comments as necessary. So we'll be learning both from that review of the old PASs, but then also what we've learnt in development of ISO 19650 parts 1, 2, 3, 5, and now what's in train with part 4 as well. So getting that consistency is going to be important. The second piece of this is the guidance. Huge amount of effort been occurring. Sarah has already gone into quite some detail about what's happening with the guidance over the next 3 to 4 months. That's not going to be a small piece of work. So again, if you feel that you can help, if you've had a light bulb moment and you're thinking, I've some ideas about how the guidance could be structured to help, please do let us know. We really want to get this right. We want to hear people's views and opinions, even if those appear to be diametrically opposed to what appears to be being presented through the Alliance and through the framework, because either we've got it wrong, or we've misunderstood what you're saying, or perhaps you're misunderstanding what we've tried to say, but there might be a communication issue going on there. So please don't hesitate, don't hang back, do come forward, and hopefully come forward in a way that we can all work together constructively. Casey has talked about the BIM interoperability report, and I believe that Fiona Moore was also presenting this morning at the Assemble meeting. So I don't want to duplicate what's already been said, apart from to say that the team, the experts are being mobilised at the moment. In fact, we had our first meeting of the leads for those work streams that Casey went through on Friday, and we're pulling that programme together so that then we can really start moving on the work. This is not a research effort. What we want is to be able to achieve practical tools, guidance, which will allow for filling in the missing pieces of implementing what had been BIM level 2 and has matured, as our understanding has matured into the UK BIM framework. So we will almost certainly be reaching out to a number of you on the call and others as well to ensure that what we're doing is right and we can move as swiftly as we can in that delivery. So please do help if we reach out to you. This is absolutely about moving forward and allowing us to pragmatically approach some of the issues which have really been quite thorny, which we really need to grasp the nettle and get over the line now. So that's around the classification side of things. We've had feedback around whether people do or do not like Uniclass, the options there may be around co-class, about NRM3, ICMS, SFG20, all of these things that needs to be sorted out so that it's unequivocal what you're needing to help on the classification side. COBie. I probably don't even need to start to say how controversial the implementation of COBie has been. And I think what we feel is that a lot of that is about there hasn't been a clear presentation of the how. It's been landed as BS 1192 Part 4. People who've wrestled with that felt that they needed to ask for and deliver the whole of COBie as one single package rather than doing this in progressive drops. So we need to be looking at that and explaining how you implement it. But then what happens, as Casey has already described, Building Smart International looks to improve its own offerings around IFC. I can't emphasize enough, however, that what we want to help with is the here and now, the present. So what needs to happen over the next 2 or 3 years, whilst not developing anything which is going to be a hindrance in moving forward to what develops with the information management framework and the national digital twin. I can't say that we've got the answers at the moment, but we're very, very aware of what the challenges are and what we need to really be keeping alert to. So I'm quite sure that you'll be hearing more on that. There's going to be blogs coming out from the Centre of Digital Built Britain and requests for assistance as we go forward. Just to touch on the other work streams, so that you have the complete picture reminded to you again. There is the upskilling. So as we've said, with Phil Reed is involved in that. There is the standard side of things. There's the AIM common data environment. That is going to be really important now with the release of ISO 19650 Part 3. I'm extremely keen that we get a better understanding of the common data environment concepts and principles and how information models are actually supported and hosted across a common data environment. So more on that as we go forward. 2 work streams which are going to be held back, the standard data approach and the procurement, to allow those other work streams to really get going on an urgent basis, and to allow us to actually develop and be more clear on the scopes required, both for the standard data approach and the procurement. But a part of what is being discussed has been, and Sue has already referenced, is around the product data. But we want to get better informed about what is needed around the product data, where we're at with the product data, and make sure that we've got a really inclusive collaboration around that piece. One of the things which touches on that, I was interested to have the discussion, was that BEIS has an energy technology list which is supported by a company, ICF. They want to know a sensible way forward with that, and feel that they need to understand the relationship with BIM and Golden Thread. So there is actually at the moment a survey out asking industry for views on this. It could be a quite interesting use case around the UK BIM framework, how you actually acquire intelligently information to support whole life of assets for the built environment, and indeed around the product data. So we do invite you to look at that survey if you like. It's a pretty full one. It takes 30-45 minutes to fill, and we'll provide you with a link to that if you feel that you'd like to contribute to that. Finally, though, I'd really like to touch on the messages partly relating to the mentoring piece today. So what I said last time was, do stay safe, stay engaged with us, and stay inspired. Have fun with all of this. But I kind of think that I'd like to put this another layer to this. Yeah, we're talking about you and me here. We're all in this together. But what does that actually mean? Our lives are changing. Our work's changed, the way we do our work, the way we're living, and some of that impacts possibly on how we feel as people, our identity. And identity is important. And if you're feeling insecure or unsure, maybe have downers, you're not alone. I think many of us struggle, have struggled, struggle sometimes. And I think it's important that we are absolutely aware of what's going on. So there's 3 things I'd like to ask of you. One is to be open to other people's circumstances and to their opinions. There've been a number of examples I've seen where people have taken me by surprise, maybe not behaved the way that I'd expect of them, said something quite strong, and I could have reacted. And actually, to be honest, sometimes I have reacted and felt a bit disappointed with myself in doing so. But I think if we can reflect that we're living in unusual times and people don't necessarily behave the way they would have done in the past, but also they may have a different opinion and there may be a good reason why they have that. So be open and listen to that. We are bound to be having some quite difficult conversations, whether that's about jobs, job security, change of job circumstances, change in scope of projects. There's going to be a lot of difficult conversations coming our way. So be open to the person that you're talking to. But then I think the other side to that is be honest. Be honest about your own feelings and your own circumstance and your own opinion, and have that mutual respect that allows you to really start moving forward and understanding. This is truly where collaboration comes in. Collaboration is not about having a cozy relationship and being able to have a hug and a drink, which of course is pretty difficult right now and is actually tough to have to not have that sort of physical interaction that we've been used to in the past. And that's why I think it's important that we accept that we will have to work harder at relationships when we're living in a far more virtual world. But the other thing then is to be kind. And I mean to be kind to others, to be understanding, to be patient and to listen. And if people are struggling and they're in trouble for any reason, one of the things I've also reflected on and heard from a really good video I saw a YouTube a couple of weeks ago is not to try to put it right, is to just listen and be there for them. So don't come up with all of the answers. They may not, or tell them, oh, don't be daft. Actually, it may just be helpful to them to know that you're listening and you're not thinking that they're daft or that you've got an obvious answer. They're just feeling sad at the moment. But remember to be kind to yourself as well. So don't be generous to everybody else and not be generous to yourselves. I hope that you don't mind me saying that. So to be open, to be honest, to be kind. I say it from my own experience as well. I don't always find this easy. I am shielding. I'm finding it hard that I've been told we've got to shield till the 1st of August, and even then that we've got to strictly follow social isolation and distancing. I think some of you will know that actually I am demonstrative. People matter to me, and wanting to support everybody is really, really important. So continue to stay safe, stay engaged, be inspired, but we are all human. So let's be patient with each other, be open, be honest, be kind. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and I'll hand back for questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Anne. Thank you. So, Pam, can we have a look at the questions?
Yes, of course. We've had a few coming, not as many as I was expecting, which is fine. And some people have left comments as opposed to questions. To Casey, is there a discussion to be had around an SME room? Aware this is a bit vague, and sort of covered across the rooms, but is there an opportunity to have an SME room?
I would say there is work to be done for SMEs to be able to understand what needs to be done, but personally, the chapter UK BIM Alliance, Building Smart UK and Ireland has no authority over the rooms that Building Smart International create. The rooms are based on sector, not on organisation type. So the sectors are represented by the rooms, and people of all representation of company sizes engage with those rooms. So you can quite easily join a room discussion or something that our chapter, Building Smart UK and Ireland, brings back to the UK and says, okay, we need representation of this particular sector from a cross sector of people that are involved in it. So it's not just getting the big companies to understand what they want to represent that in the international level. It's really about getting a good cross-section of understanding from everybody's needs and requirements. And the room discussions are about defining, creating the standards, so extending schemas and things like that. But if someone wants to contribute something from an SME perspective, we do absolutely need that at chapter level, because it might affect and it might change the way we communicate what those standards and processes and whatever are, and how they're happening at international level. So if anyone wants to get in touch and make a recommendation about how we do that, then we're absolutely going to take that on board. You can get in touch with me directly, so we can talk through that and see how we might change the way we communicate here in the UK.
Excellent, thanks, Casey. Dan, do you think there is enough awareness of the parallel standards?
Thank you, Pam. I was starting to write my answer back, Sean. The short answer is no, but I don't think it's. I think that the blame is on both sides, because I think we BSI are rubbish at discovery. So I think there are faults on all sides, but I think there is more education needed about what the parallel standards are. And I think the great example is that I don't know what they all are. And as John Forge reminded me on Twitter, he's the one who pointed me towards BS 8888 in the first place. So we're still learning, and Anne has to bear the brunt of me showing up at standards meetings to say I've just discovered another 8 standards that are really relevant in this space. So there is, and that keeps happening. So I have to keep apologising. But there are so many, and and they all serve a specific purpose. But I think the problem is a cultural one in a way. And this is me making a sweeping statement, but it's gone 4 in the afternoon, so I'm allowed to do it. That a lot of people in the built environment see standards as hurdles to overcome. They're what stops you from having building control sign off or something like that. Is that no? So they become problems that people have to resolve, as opposed to tools that solve problems in themselves. I think if we can change that mindset into standards help, they don't hurt, I think that's when we can get there. But I think there is more education that's needed. The difficulty is, where do you stop? Because there are just so many and so many good ones. How do you pick and choose?
Okay, thank you. There is a question here by Sean to you, Katya, but it may also involve Phil Reed. While you were presenting, Sean asked, do you think there is a synergy between this process and those being proposed by Building Smart UK and Ireland for the industry foundation education?
I think collaboration between the different kind of silos and hubs for BIM development is always very helpful. And even beyond that, as I said, we've been influenced by Built by Us. We've been kind of connecting with other organizations and learning from them. So in terms of learning for processes, absolutely. Prescriptive learning is always slightly different from mentoring specifically, but there's a lot of things about the process and about a way of thinking that could be very, very productive in application into a more prescriptive learning process. So I think there could also absolutely be connections if you want them to be. And there's always this kind of constant database of people that we create with these projects, where we understand who is up for helping and who has the ability and capacity to do that, so we can always connect on that level too.
Okay, thank you, Katya. And I don't see any more questions. I see comments. So there's a comment around the development of the guidance and breaking it down, making it easier to use. That was from Sean. Thank you for that. The others have been asked. I suppose the only other one that I could take, and I may bring Duncan into this one as well, is we've had a question about what's happening with the Northwest regional group, and that is one that Duncan looks after, so I'm going to ask Duncan to talk about it. If you're there, Duncan.
I was just listening. I wasn't know I was going to get anything then.
Okay. So
you
the question
caught me off guard. Sorry.
No. So the question we had was, what has happened to the Northwest group? Not heard of any events happening for a long time. So I know that the chair who was involved in that group was furloughed. I'm not sure if they still are. So in that sense, nothing has specifically happened in the Northwest dedicated to the Northwest. But that doesn't stop anybody getting involved in any of the other events that are currently being hosted by the other regional groups, because they're all virtual. So they're not limited territorial wise or regional wise. So anybody can get involved in those. There are a few other people who are involved in the Northwest group, but we need to still talk to them and see what's going on and how we can help and support them. Is there anything you want to add to that, Duncan?
No, I think that's a good summary of where we're at. Yeah, I think we've got various options and thoughts, and we don't want to just charge off without losing the good stuff that has happened in the region previously as well. So it will be a phased transition, I should imagine.
Brilliant, thank you. I don't think there are any more questions. Hadil, do you want to wrap up?
Yes, I would like to just say a huge thank you to everybody who presented today, all of our speakers, panelists. I'd like to thank my colleague Greg for co-hosting, and also a special thanks to Pam for all of her efforts in organizing the event today. And also thank you to all of the attendees for your time and for listening. If you do have any additional questions or comments, please feel free to contact on the channels shown on the screen. Do follow the UK BIM Alliance on Twitter, and sign up to the newsletter so that you can get the latest news and updates on events and everything. Thank you, everyone, and have a good afternoon.